there are two ways of continuation. Okay, one is the continuation in paper, and that's the one where you end up in the middle of something and you say, wait, I don't understand, I must be missing some prerequisites. Like this is a kasha after two kashas and so on. Another one is where you don't really know how to think in a certain way. And for that kind of prerequisite, or being in the middle, is the one that's really important. And it's also the one where you can't really learn things in a linear way, or at least you don't necessarily need to learn things in a linear way. Like, for example, if I tell you I want to go through, someone could, in other words, you could do the first one without really understanding anything. Right? You could read Aristotle on what's this part of the soul and what's that part, and what's the general part and what's the specific part, and more specific, and moving on, and this cause and that cause, and you need to work that in order, because like to have a list, it's a list. There's 4 things. Wait, I'm up to number 3 and I don't know number 2, so I'm lost in my list, right? That's like chitzanistic way of being lost. But another way of being lost is to just not know what kind of things the guy is even saying. Like, I don't even speak his language. And many people could tell you, not for Aristotle, because Aristotle doesn't have as many chassidim, at least in Lakewood. But for many other books, many people could tell you the whole thing from beginning to end, but they can't think even one thought that it says in the book. Like GPT could maybe tell you the whole book, but he can't think even one thought, Many people like that, and they're going to spoil, he could do the same thing as me. No, he can't, because he doesn't think anything. Right? Point is, so last week it was not like a certain chapter that you don't know, but I sometimes do this and then realize how far everyone is from each other, because, and also there's some real questions. I'm not saying that there's not real questions to be had and real open questions, because like there's certain ways of thinking where you need to figure out a way to get into them. That was my subject of those classes, relative to certain issues, but in more general. Like last week we discussed how, like the thing to me that turns into me the most like surprising for the way we're used to thinking is we talk about quantity, remember? Mm-hmm. And which comes into the discussion.
I remember us discussing can you buy people at Walmart?
Can you?
Buy people at Walmart. Why can't you buy people at Walmart?
Why can't Walmart? No.
So I'll make
okay, but that's exactly why there's no build a person kit in Walmart, other than what's known as making a goylem. Right. And that's one interesting thing, but that's really directly relevant to what we're discussing if you think about it. But the way to show that is very different than what we think is like the basic ways of thinking is what we discussed about quantity. What did we discuss? That there's a modern view. I'm trying to speak coherently, so we'll get around. There's like a modern view that says that there's quantity and quality. These are two very different kind of things. For example, quality is usually taken to be subjective. Quantity is objective, is basically what defines objectivity almost, right? Because scientific, it means quantifiable, means I could put it into a number, means Excel understands it, means I could put it into a computer, and so on, right? And we assume that all the good things belong to quality, not to quantity, right? That's like a very common, for spiritual people, for ethical people, when you talk about good things, you talk about what the good is, we generally think that the good consists in quality and not in quantity. So it's not about having more money, it's about knowing how to use your money better. Not about having more knowledge, but having better knowledge, or things like that. That might not make sense.
Having one person in the whole world ever knows Hashem.
I had said once that makes sense if you think, yeah, but that's like.
I literally just heard that.
No, that was okay. I'm gonna get lost here. Okay. Point is, we're very used to this kind of dichotomy. It's very normal way of thinking, and some people are just, well, quantity is objective, so therefore it's true. Whatever can be mathematized, that's what's true. In other words, it's only true in a mathematical way. It's not true any way beyond that. If you have any impressions, any poetry, any like what we call quality, yeah, that's metaphysics, that's mysticism, that's subjective, that only exists in your mind, which is what subjective is supposed to mean. Other people take subjective to mean cannot be decided on the truth, which is a very weird confusion that people have, right? Because subjective has two meanings. Subjective doesn't, just to be very clear, right? And everyone confuses them, right? Subjective can mean something that exists in a mind of a person only, what Aristotle used to call in your mind, right? In thought. Or it could mean something that doesn't have truth, that is relative. Now, relative doesn't mean subjective, and subjective doesn't mean relative, because nothing wrong with things being relative.
Or subjective.
Or subjective, but when we confuse both of them, we end up with some weird kiggle that doesn't make any sense. Relative just means that the kind of concept I'm using only makes sense in relative to something else, like the concept large, right? Nobody goes around saying large is fake because it's a relative. Everyone knows that large doesn't mean anything real. In other words, it doesn't have like in the theory of relativity, right? It doesn't have a referent outside of the frame of reference, right? You could only be larger than, you can't be large all by yourself, right? But does that mean large is just a fake thing? Like, because scientists don't study largeness? Well, they don't, because it's not a very useful concept for them. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? So if I say goodness is relative to badness, like you can say, well, that means that morality doesn't exist. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's a relative concept. That's fine. That's a thing that exists, a kind of thing that exists. Relativity is a kind of thing that exists. So if time is relative to space or whatever, they both exist. They just exist in a certain way. There's a certain relation between time and space that the theory of relativity tries to define and explain precisely, but doesn't make neither of them exist less or more. It's a very weird confusion that people have. And the same way, things that are subjective don't make things exist more. They just make them exist in a different way in a human being. Right? Anyways, so back to the thing. So we have this very weird dichotomy. And then, for example, people get used to thinking that quantity is what things are made out of. Okay, that's where we got into our discussion. Because we're discussing how some things are one, right? We're talking about the unity of the soul. And Aristotle is this is the question that we're sort of discussing in this sub-series, which starts, in the last like 5 classes were about this, 4 or 5. Right, the unity of the soul, the oneness, the visibility, he calls it, right, which is the other side of unity. And I ask you, is it one thing? And you start thinking, okay, does that mean can I cut it up, right? And people think, well, there's different ways, right? And the big thing that we need to figure out here is how many ways something can be one thing, right? There's a lot of ways to be one thing, and we have to disambiguate them in order to make sense. But a certain like weird way in which people think is that if something can be larger or smaller than something else, then it must be two things. That was the question that Rav, what's his name, asked. That's a way of putting it. Okay. So in other words, I'm telling you, I could say even a body, right? There's some ways in which bodies can't be one, but in some ways, even a living body, and the soul is the soul of a living body. So physical living body, right? Natural living body. So it's not like, we're not talking about the separate soul when we're talking about the oneness of the soul. That would be the separate of the intellect. The oneness of the intellect has its own kind of oneness. But when we talk about what we're talking about primarily up to now is the oneness of the soul of the body, right? The form of the body, right? And it seems like very intuitively wrong to everyone, because obviously bodies can be larger or smaller, for example. In other words, they have quantity, right? They can be measured. You could be so many and so many pounds. You could have so many and so many parts or organs, and so on. And obviously, having quantity means being made out of numbers somehow. Being made out of a lot. Like you say, a bigger person is made out of more person. So there's more person and less person that we could think of. And it seems normal to people to think, so therefore we must be able to cut off that part and have it be a part of a person. Well, that doesn't follow, right? That's wrong. Immediately wrong, right? But it seems scientifically correct. It's like the scientific way of thinking thinks that, right? If anything can be bigger and or smaller, that means that it's basically made out of parts, and the bigger one just has more of them, right? So bigger and smaller is not a real thing, because big is just a relative term, right? So you can't use that to make sense of anything. The relativity doesn't help us making sense of anything. So what do we mean when we say it's bigger? We mean that it's made out of more shtiklach. There's more of him. And more means that there are separate parts in it somehow, right? So then it can't be a unity. It can't be one person. There's be a lot of different cells making you up. Each one of them just as much a cell, and putting them together doesn't do anything to them, right? They stay, and if you take them apart, they still say the same thing, what they were. They don't. And that's what's like a certain basic metaphysical thought behind a certain kind of reductionism that they end up with, or a certain kind of way of understanding. And it's all tied up with this whole thing of quantity sort of being the real thing that exists. And quantity meaning things being made out of a number of things. So we think like at the end of the day, things are made of a certain amount of atoms, which really means that there's more of it, or more complex structures made out of atoms and so on. And then we say, well, I tell you, okay, so let's think about quality, for example. And you say, I ask you if a beautiful painting is made out of, which is beautifuler than another beautiful painting. So this was my question. If there's a beautiful painting, it was beautifuler, right, has more beauty than another less beautiful painting, does that mean that it's made out of two small beautiful paintings? Or it's like an atomic quantity? No, because that's quality, not quantity. In other words, it doesn't exist. There's no beauty. Beauty can't be compared. Well, could we compare beauty? No, it's all subjective. I think that's very wrong. We can obviously compare beauty. I think that here it shows you how this leads into a very weird, like denying reality kind of conclusion. Like nothing is more beautiful than anything else. Is that seriously what anyone believes? Let's say me and you can't agree which is more beautiful, then we have a discussion. We can have a discussion. We have a problem. We have machlokes. But that doesn't seem to lead necessarily to the conclusion that this doesn't exist.
People say that.
Yeah, people say that.
People say that in the other way.
But that's wrong. Nobody really thinks that, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
People say that because what this real view leads to. But it logically leads to that. But I don't think anyone really thinks that there's...
Why would it logically lead to that?
Because if things that are not quantifiable don't exist...
Saying this assumption that they don't exist, people would say that they do exist. Just
beauty is not a thing that we have again. So beauty doesn't have a number, right? If we could put a number to beauty, theoretically, if we could put a number to beauty, then beauty does exist.
Well,
But the problem is that we think that there's no good way to do that, since nobody tried, apparently. So this is where I got into the thing, right?
So how would you imagine we'd go about quantifying beauty? What would be a good?
I don't think there's any problem with quantifying beauty. It's everyone else that has that problem. This is what I'm going to.
Okay, I'm saying, what would you
The
imagine?
Welt, the Olam Chashvim, that we can, well, very simple. Just like we quantify anything else in the world. We line them all up in a long line and we call this 1, this 2, this 3, and so on.
Well, not necessarily, right? Because if I have a tape measure, I can use it on any object.
Exactly. And you could use, well, tape measure, no, a tape measure is just a very concrete, how do you say, like instance of doing this. But what we're doing with a tape measure is that we've got, see, this is, again, what does tape measure do? Goes back to the machlokes of what tape measures do. We're not understanding what tape measures do. People think that tape measures do something real. In other words, they don't realize how abstract tape measures are. In other words, tape measures are the act of measuring, right? Tape measures don't tell us how do tape measures start working? How do we get to the idea of a tape measure? So one theory that people seem to take for granted is that everything is made out of a certain amount of inches, right? And how do we find out how many inches it is? By comparing it to a tape measure, which we know how many inches it has. Just if you realize, that's an act of comparison. That's how tape measures work. They don't actually count atoms. Tape measures don't count anything.
Everyone thinks that the unit
right?
of measurement...
They just compare things.
No one thinks that the unit of measurement is absolute, right?
Doesn't matter where we make where the cutoff is. That doesn't matter. But again, that's just an arbitrary, because we call inches this, if you call it meters, who cares? That doesn't make a difference.
Right,
so there's still more of it, right? There's still a certain amount of it.
A certain amount of
quantity. The quantity wasn't given birth to when they made a meter.
So inherent
right?
amount. You say that I'm taking a specific amount that you
of length
right, and you say that this will, for the purposes of whatever your purposes are, you want to use this metric as
but that's again, that's just a practical. I'm not worried about the practical. So exactly, so we got a meter which intermediates the lining everything up. So that's all tape measures are doing. Again, now you're getting to my theory of tape measures. The first theory of tape measures is that tape measures are telling us somehow how many inches there are in something. That's not true. That's not what tape measures are, and that's not what inches are. What tape measures are doing is telling us, since someone before us theoretically took everything in the world and saw that some things are bigger and some things are smaller, and decided that we can line them up in order of how big they are.
We're not lining them up. We're
theoretically lining them up.
Rationing out a certain amount.
No. We're theoretically lining them up, and then we just take one to be the standard, so to speak. Not just in order to have a coherent language which you will agree on. The only truth that lies behind all the tape measures is that things are longer than other things.
So, and you think that
that's the observation that we have.
So would we at least say that, at least in regards to beauty, maybe it can be measured?
Well, we're gonna get to beauty. I'm gonna get to beauty in a second. But I have to first agree that there's two theories of tape measures, and people seem to think that tape measures are actually telling us how many inches there are. And really, what they're doing is telling us how this compares to all the other things that can be compared to one thing, which we call inches. Inches are not a real thing, but the point is that what inches are doing is a real thing, which is comparing this to everything else in the world that has a certain length.
In some sense, I think people realize, though, that, like, let's say if something is 9 inches big and 10 whatever inch is big, that you can obviously divide this thing into 3 if it's 9 inches, and you
I
can't
understand.
If it's 10, right?
I basically said,
Again,
That's a weird thing to think, right?
but that's only
that's
true.
is that part
That's
of the
not
problem?
no. That's then you're getting into numbers. I'm not worried about the problem that inches are arbitrary cutoff. That's not because that's not relevant to what I'm saying. I don't care. So you could go to inches. You could do meters. You could do whatever kind of numbers you have. The point is that there is not a certain amount of anything of quantity. Quantity is not that things are made out of a certain amount of things, and then tape measure lets us know how many those are. Quantity is inherently a relative thing. All we know about the world is that things are longer than other things.
But length is a very different property of the world than beauty, right?
I'm talking about length right now. I'm not talking anything about beauty.
Okay, so when I say length, I think everyone thinks that
Most people think that tape measures tell us how much of it there is. How many inches are there?
right,
But that's not what it does, because there's no such a thing as inches. Again, there's no such a thing.
well,
No.
to the extent that there are inches, there are
Not
measurements of
no
it, right?
no. There's inches. Not because the difference of inches and something else. Inches don't tell us anything about the thing. They tell us something about its relation to something else. Inches don't tell me. If I tell you that you're 200 inches tall, that doesn't tell me anything about you.
That's where people locate I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that the problems were located that in beauty.
A normal.
you can't
We're not
extract
talking
it.
anything again. I don't say anything
No, I
about beauty
understand
yet.
what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that
Right.
people seem to think intuitively, normally, I don't know, that their things are made out of lengths, right? And widths and measure, in other words, quantity, okay? That's a real thing. A tape measure, if you go to any scientist, a person tells me, whatever a tape measure tells me is real. Why is it real? Because things really are made out of, again, not necessarily inches, but quantity. Whatever inches are cutting up in some arbitrary way. But that thing that they're cutting up, which we call quantity, those things are real. And they're properties of the things, right? Maybe they're not only properties of things, they're the only thing that we really know about the thing. How much of them there are. How many of them. Okay? And this is just the metaphysics. Maybe it's true, but just metaphysics. What we really know, what observation tells us, what we know from the world is that some things are bigger than other things. In other words, when we theoretically line up every object in the world on one big line, we could show each one being longer than the other, and that's what measuring is. That's what length is. That's what tape measures tell us.
Right.
Tape measures are just a certain language that helps us show me where I am in this long comparison of everything in the world. That's all tape measures are doing. So they're doing a relative thing. Just to be very clear, a tape measure is a relative thing. Don't believe your teacher tells you that quality is not relative. It's objective, and this is a relative. Literally, it's only telling us the thing are longer or shorter. It's not telling us anything about the thing. Well, maybe it does, but you have to have some kind of metaphysical idea of what things are in order for that to make sense.
Okay.
Okay, because all it's really doing is, okay, so now I claim that since you understand this, if you would understand that it's measuring something real, then we get into a problem because maybe there's nothing real called beauty. And then people seem to think, because of this wrong theory, unfounded theory at least, that tape measure, quantitative measures measure something, how many of the thing is made out of. Everyone is very sure that you can't measure beauty. Because beauty is not what something is made out of.
Well, here's my question.
Isn't this is not what everyone thinks? Doesn't everyone think that you could measure how many inches something has and you can't measure how beautiful it is?
I think that is
They
the
think
case.
they think that it's a category error.
Like Aristotle says that you can't, like, if someone is expecting...
Don't tell me names. Tell me what's the brown.
Okay. We can expect a different level of precision from mathematics than we can expect from
I don't know. I didn't say it. I don't know. I don't agree with that right now.
Okay.
And that's why this is not ethics. I'm talking about beauty.
Can we achieve this?
I don't know that measurements. I don't know that and tape measures are so precise. That's different. But yeah, again, we can get to that. But that's not a difference between quantity and quality. It's a difference how good your tape measurer is. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So let me continue where I'm getting to. I didn't even say anything yet. What I'm saying is, and I said this last week. And I didn't want to say, but what I said is that if you think that tape measures are just lining up the whole world and telling us where this thing is on that very long line, which has all objects on Earth or in the universe, I don't see any reason why we can't do the same exact thing for paintings. Okay? And the fact that everyone thinks that no, paintings you can't measure how beautiful it is doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Just basically makes no reason why not. Because you don't have a tape measure? So let's, or because we don't agree on how beautiful things are. Okay, let's take one person. Again, we don't agree on how big things are either sometimes, but that's a side problem. But in the basic sense, we can try to solve those problems. I don't actually think it's hard to solve those problems. But assuming the basic sense that everyone thinks that it's just not a quantity seems to be totally wrong. Of course, it is a quantity, because some things are more beautiful than other things. I think everyone agrees with that. Again, if you totally deny there's any standard for beauty, nothing can be more beautiful than anything else, no problem. But I don't think anyone really thinks that. So as long as beauty is a property of things, something about things, some are more beautiful than others, then we could theoretically, again, maybe we don't have a good tape, like you say, maybe we don't have a good tool to do that, and maybe we just have too many machloikas about it that nobody would agree to my tape measure. No problem. These are two-side problems. But theoretically, according to me, what I think is beauty, I could take the whole world and line it all up in terms of how beautiful, and then I could assign a number to each. This is exactly what tape measures do. It just assigns a number to everything in that world, right? We call this 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and so on, until up to infinity, right? And we could do the same exact thing for paintings, and then my computer could understand, and then I could give a computer which has this thing, and it could tell me how beautiful, where something belongs, right? That computer would be, or a tape measure, would be my tape measure for beauty, right? I believe that there can definitely be a computer program that can tell us how beautiful something is. And I think those programs actually exist. Because there's no reason not to. Now there's of course problems. Of course, the reason why people don't do it, I'm just saying that there's no basic problem about this, because quantity is not a thing that things are made out of versus beauty. Both are things that either things are made out of or not, but they're definitely relative kind of things, and we can definitely line everything up and give each a number and then work with those numbers.
See, but it's not as much of a number as much as it is
a number is an order. That's what numbers are. They order things in the world.
With length, I think what's attractive about using it as a measurement is the availability of precision, right?
Okay. So this is a baya. Again, this is a side baya that we're stupid. That's what I keep saying. We're stupid. We don't have good numbers for beauty.
Or that something simply exists less precisely than others?
No, I don't think it doesn't exist precisely. I think beauty is probably the more precise thing.
Really?
Beauty is definitely more precise.
Even let's say taste.
Beauty is more precise than numbers.
Can I say that
Why would
a
it
hot
be
dog
precise?
tastes better than a hamburger?
Yes, you can, of course.
Sense. I have a very difficult time.
I don't know what tastes good means exactly, but yes, of course.
Okay.
Would you say maybe...
Okay, so the way I think about this,
when
actually...
someone replies, they don't know exactly what beauty means.
So, again, that's a different baya. If you don't know... No, I don't...
Could you maybe say
they're
that
both complicated.
That two people are correct, they just different conceptions of what different beauties, and both of those things are true?
Well, probably those things are true, and which just means that we don't have a good enough tape measure.
No, I'm saying, but they're both right. They just have different.
In principle,
they're just measuring different things.
Okay, so that's very similar to someone. That's what we call this in math, dimensions. Okay, if I'm measuring the width of something, you're measuring length, we're both right, and we're going to fight about it forever. Now, I think that beauty is a high-dimensional thing. In other words, it's very hard to put it on one line. We got to put it on 5,000 lines, and that's why people think that it's subjective. It's not subjective. It just has more numbers. And that's why if you have got a computer program that has a high dimension, does very high dimension math, known as, I forgot what it's called. Most machine learning models are based on something like that. Then you can definitely tell me how beautiful something is, and you could give me an exact number for it even. Humans are just dumb. We're very bad at doing math. The reason that math is so simple is because we're very bad at doing math. Human math is very simple because humans are extremely bad at math. We're very good at estimation and like fuzzy things. We're very bad at doing math. And which is why you should be very suspicious of reducing of saying that only the things that humans could mathematize are true or real, because that limits the world to a very small subset of human computable math or human understandable math. And a priori, you should think that humans are very bad at math. Most humans, including human mathematicians. Well, humans have used tools to make themselves better at math since forever. And one of those tools is a computer and a calculator, and that actually helps us give numbers to many things. And we shouldn't be surprised by that, right? That's why I said that people being surprised that computers could recognize beauty, in other words, high-dimensional objects, that's all it means. Things that we need a lot more than one number to describe. There's nothing surprising about that. It's only surprising if you bought into this whole dichotomy where there's some things that are quality that belong to a human kind of observation, which are somehow mystical or magical, and don't really belong to the objects, and therefore can't be counted or can't be given assigned a number, can't be compared. We have this like whole inconsumability, like you can't compare. There's different, like people would say, there's different kinds of beauty. There's no way to put them on a scale next to each other. I don't think that's true. Again, maybe there's more than one scale, and we have to know how to value each scale. No problem.
Are you going back to saying that beauty is also numbers?
Of course.
So this
It's as numbers are. Numbers are not numbers. Numbers don't measure anything. A beauty doesn't measure anything. But both of them are the same numbers. You could assign a number, just like we assign up. Look, length is a very simple thing. That's why people have figured out how to count lengths forever. Speed is a more complicated thing. People only figured out how to count speed 300 years ago. I mean, this is not, and beauty is something so complex that we're just trying to figure out how to count it. But there's no real reason to think that it's a different kind of thing. That's all. This is all going back to show that, and then, if there's different conceptions of beauty, then they're just different things. It just means that our language is poor, right? That's fine. There's different conceptions of length and of all kinds of things, just because that's why we have technical language in most science to give us words for things that everyday language doesn't give us good enough words. That doesn't do anything.
So would we argue that
that's
like what
fine.
you were saying before, that the overall determination of beauty can sometimes rely too much on the emphasis of one scale versus another? So I say how big something.
My argument right here is that people think that beauty is magic just because we're stupid and we don't have good language for discussing beauty, and Kavachome, we don't have a way to make it into numbers.
So, but aside from what people are saying, I'm saying is that is there, like what he was saying, that if we to say how big something is, right? Meaning maybe we can't describe beauty directly, but we can describe different beautiful aspects, let's say, and scale those out. But we can't do the same with, let's say, the total concept, because it would mean, like science can't.
It's just not a good enough concept for you. The human concept is not good enough, not precise enough. Like we could define it. There's a discipline called aesthetics that tries to define it. It doesn't seem to be so complicated. So it's possible.
Could we organize all of reality in order of how wonderful it is?
Yeah, of course we could. We got to give like 35 different definitions for wonderful, and then you'll know what you mean. Because you use baby words.
Right, but
there's no baby words for many things.
Beauty, though,
same thing. Beauty is a baby word, obviously.
In the same way as length, right? That's just it ends up becoming a bit.
After you disambiguate things, you could sort of return to the baby language and give you a very pretty simple level.
When
scale,
I call something beautiful, what am I referring to? What aspect of?
Yeah, you're just being a baby. You just have like when a baby says something is big. Doesn't mean how big does it mean? It just doesn't have a concept of more precise language. That's fine. That's
right. But sometimes with the precision involves a certain level of exclusion of some.
Exactly, because this is not a one thing, or it's one thing in a very fuzzy way. That's how everything started.
Some things are fuzzy.
No, nothing is fuzzy. I don't know why we think anything is fuzzy. I don't think anything is fuzzy. I think that people are very stupid and hate learning new languages, and they have a easier time pretending that things are magic than figuring out the language.
They'd rather put these.
I'd say is that it's fuzzy, or I'd say that it's or achieving some kind of precision in that area is more difficult than others.
Okay,
we say
that means that it's more complicated. It's fine. No problem.
But are we arguing that every field of knowledge is somehow?
Again, the fact that we haven't. For us, the human one, no, of course not, because just like geometry is somehow more precise than calculus, more precise for elementary school kids at least, right? Doesn't have all these weird
but
things.
Everything ultimately can come down to some level of precision. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't know what you mean by precision. There's another word that we think.
This is exactly.
I think that has definitions. Yeah. Of course.
Okay.
You're just gonna have these three beauties might mean three different things, right? In other words, be different scales or different kinds. Like we could say, call it different dimensions. Again, this is just using a quantitative language.
Beauties. This painting. There's three.
Yeah. Of course. I think the paintings have a certain amount of beauty.
And once this language is understood,
again, my big thing, the point of me is not, but what I don't read it backwards. What I'm trying to say is, is not that you could tell me how many beauties of things have, because I think that's an implication of what I'm saying. That's why I'm not surprised that a computer can do it, because it's obviously made out of a certain amount of things and it's also a certain amount of beauty. I could give you, like I told you, I can give you simple definitions of beauty, which will help you. Maybe beauty has a lot of definitions, but certain simple definitions of beauty that people use are very obviously quantifiable, right? Mm-hmm. Like what do we talk about? Like symmetry, or like surprise versus regularity, all kinds of things like that are very easily quantifiable. It doesn't seem to be a problem to say that this is twice as beautiful as something else, exactly twice or 2.5 times. Yeah, we don't do that because we're very bad beauty people, beauty experts.
I don't understand that you're trying to say that beauty is not, it's a property of the object or whatever.
As a property of as anything else. I don't think that's more or less.
Like what I think of beauty is more of a measurement of the reaction of the person.
Yeah, that's Kant's invention.
To the seeing of the item as opposed to the...
Yeah, that's something that the guy called Kant invented, that theory. That's very dumb. Of course things are actually beautiful. Why would you even think that it's a reaction? That's such a weird thing to say. Do you think that...
Beauty, I think that's what it means.
No, that's what some philosophers...
They're measuring the,
Of course not.
Not measuring the
Why don't you think that when that inches are the reaction of tape measures to tables?
No, because
because
you're measuring a property of an item, right? They're measuring...
How do you know?
They're quantifying...
You say that because...
So, but would I assume
you
that,
say that because...
Would I assume that porcupines are not only spiky, but also...
That's what they teach you in the brainwashing school.
But would I assume that a porcupine is not only spiky, but it's also painful?
When people talk
Like that's a
about
beautiful
beautiful,
porcupine?
they're not describing...
I don't know what does that mean? It's ugly, maybe.
If I experience pain as a result of a certain kind of contact with it, does that mean that the...
Beauty doesn't mean pleasure. I mean, come on. Beauty is something that exists in people, or things that can have pain. I don't know why things should be able to have pain.
No,
I don't get the question.
I'm saying is,
I didn't say that there are no things that exist only in human souls.
So
I didn't say that's not what I said. I just said that
nobody
nobody says that things that are beauty means that just some doichik that the philosophers come up with when they get pushed to a wall. No normal person actually thinks that beauty is a reaction that people have to things. No normal person actually thinks that.
For example, if you would disambiguate,
so we all assume pain is the result.
Then you
of
describe all your things. The person
right?
says, "Okay, so I see, symmetry.
Symmetry is
X, I see Y,
so, and all of those, none of those things, none of those things are actually part of what a person's reaction. All of those things are facts about the thing that is beautiful.
Right, no, for sure. But if you disambiguate, you would end up like the reaction itself would like. It almost takes away. That's the point.
I don't think there's something called pleasure. For example, if I take pleasure in beautiful things, the pleasure is something that happens in me. The thing that the item is pleasurable, but it's not pleasure, right? Or if I have awe or any other kind of reaction, but we actually have words that are called for beauty, and they're very simply understood to be something about the thing. There's no reason. It's the only reason people try to define beauty in terms of our reaction is because they had some philosophical shtickle Torah which says that things can't have beauty, but they somehow... By the way, Kant doesn't think that things have numbers either, of course. Right? To remember, the same Tachocham that says this really doesn't believe in things having quantity either, or space or time. Right? Or any categories.
Only the nominal.
He thinks that those are problems that we have, not that things have. We don't even know that things have causality. We don't know anything, according to him. Beauty is not very special. We have judgment, we don't know, there's nothing. We might know that they exist, even that, no. But
not directly.
Yeah, there's no reason. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that if you understand this, then you should expect that beauty can be given a number. But didn't come here to say that beauty is a number. I came to say that that numbers are as much about what the thing is made out of as beauty is. Maybe it's not. Maybe the thing is not really made out of that. Maybe it's just a comparison to other things. That can be, and we'll figure out what kind of thing that is. But that's what I'm saying. I don't know why did I say any of this.
Is it more difficult to compare the beauty of things than it is to compare the length?
What?
Is it more difficult to compare the beauty of things than the length?
It's not more difficult, no.
Okay.
It's more difficult to get your friend to agree on beauty than on length, yeah.
Why would we assume that would be so?
Because at some point it was not so. Before people invented math, which what happened at a certain point in history was about as hard. Because there's actually like collusions for this and things. Like I can claim that that's longer, and I claim that's shorter, and we end up with a theory that length doesn't really exist. That just each person measures it. And there was a guy who went around saying man is the measure of all things, who sort of believed that, right? He went around with these kind of proofs, like are we going up a mountain or down a mountain, right? Well, it depends. For me, I'm going up, you're going down, right? So does the mountain go up or down? Remember? Mm-hmm. Well, neither of them, huh? So is the mountain big or small? Well, if you're close to it, it's big. If you're far from it, it's small. So mountains don't have lengths. That's literally what the relativists think or thought. Right? And then, for some reason, this is just brainwashing. You go to school, you go to especially modern school, but you go to school since forever, and they teach you geometry. And geometry was invented by a guy who figured out that we don't have to just go around saying this is a big mountain. We could actually give a number to it. And we could do a lot of things as well. Once we give numbers, we have a whole chachma called math, which does things just to the numbers, and we can figure out all kinds of things about it. Very interesting, like magic almost. Yeah, you just need to know the number of something. Literally in Kabbalah, math is like Kabbalah, right? It's magic, makes no sense, right? Math is magic. Gosh, I need to explain everyone how everything is magic. Math is magic because and used to be, we have to try to imagine how the world looks. This is what I'm saying. This is a different kind of Seder Alimah. We have to imagine how the world looks if you don't believe in math, okay? And there was some guy, Pythagoras, and people like him, who invented math, okay? Math as we know it. Okay? If you read Gemara, they didn't know about math, basically. I mean, they knew some primitive math, but they really knew such things, right? So, for example, math tells me something like this. Give me any like theorem, like
A squared plus B squared.
right, very basic theorems, right? So that was the Pythagorean theorem, right? The Pythagorean theorem tells me something. I don't remember how to work with it though, so that's a problem. But
you square the length of the two
Angles of a triangle.
yeah, I know it's too complicated. The point is,
Fitting into the squares.
okay.
Fitting in the squares.
No, but for example, okay, but I'm too much information that I need for it to work, is what I'm saying. But for example, okay, we know that there's triangles. It's not so complicated to figure out there are triangles in the world, okay? Yeah? But sometimes so if I see a mountain that's a triangle shape, yeah, that's a triangle shape, okay? My friend stands on one side and I stand on the other side. My friend tells me how long that side is, I tell him how long this side is, and so on, right? But what if I have no friend on the other side? I basically don't know how long it is, right? But assuming that I do know that it's a triangle, which is something that I might not sure how I would know that. But assuming that I do know, comes some Mekibel and says, look, you don't need to know, you don't need to look. You just need to take a number of this. Tell me how many are on this side and how many are on that side, and I'll tell you how long the other side is. Nothing to do with the thing you're measuring. That's why I call it Kabbalah. It's got nothing to do with the mountain. You don't need to know anything about mountains. It's amazing. The guy is not a mimchal of mountains. I don't know anything about mountains and how mountains work or what mountains are. I never saw a mountain in my life. I just know one thing, like a thing called a number, a magic thing called a number. We can assign a number, like walk along the side of the mountain and tell me how many steps you took, and I'll tell you how many steps it will take to go to the other side of the mountain. Precisely, not even one, I won't even make a mistake. This is magic, if you think about it. Most basic math is magic. I haven't got a circle. I mean, the Gemara Sikha didn't know how many people fit into a Sikha that's circular, right? You got to do experiments. It's very hard because some people are fat, some people are skinny, and who knows. I mean, I'm serious. It's not such an easy thing. If you Tosfos, they kind of they try to do some geometrical proofs for it. It's very complicated. And
isn't math just a description?
Math is magic.
No,
the fact that math
magic,
works, mathematical processes, the fact that they work is magic. There's no reason. I mean, you are so brainwashed by the math school that you think that the world is literally made out of math. Well, that's what Pythagoras thought, but he really thought it. You just get taught that it somehow works, and we don't even know why, and just how. It's not a description of anything.
Looked around in the world, saw certain properties that seem to.
No, math is not a property of the world. Again, well, we can get into what it's a property. Exactly, which is very weird. How do you know that the same Chit Torah? How do you even know? Again, it's exactly Kabbalah. Exactly Kabbalah. Kabbalah tell you the same thing. If you know how much the gematria of, I mean, gematria is literally geometry, right? And if you know me how much this word is, I could tell you how it connects to another word. But like I could tell you the value, the spiritual value of it, without understanding. For example, this is my example. I always say gematria. People think that gematria is nonsense. Of course, most gematrias are nonsense in what they're trying to say. But the theory of gematria is the most truth about Torah that can ever be, because literally math. In other words, anyone that tells you something that is the meaning of the word, you need the context, because no yeh means is will be, and if you take away the yeh, that means something else, and you add another vav, it makes some third thing, and all kind of weird, complicated contextual rules, and you need to know so much about the actual text that you're learning, okay? But there's something called gematria that says the yeh is 30, and that's the most true thing that you can say about the world, the word, and that's why we have to have stam nazirus for 30 days or whatever, and just because it's 30, and 30 is literal, and now the weird thing about math is that it tells you, now that you know that this is 30, now everything you can do to 30, you can do to everything that's 30. This is called sympathetic magic. Okay, think about it, just sympathetic magic. It makes as much sense, just for a baby that never heard of math, it makes as much sense as, I'm a hand, and a handle of a door is also hands. If I shake my hand, the handle should break. Makes that about that much sense. And it turns out math works. Okay, but the point is not so simple that it works. By the way, try to prove that math works. Okay, the point is that it's. How did I get to all of this? The point is that math is not obviously just what the world is made out of. The world is made out of, the things that the world are made out of are people and trees and mountains and clouds and things like that. And math is some kind of magical theory that claims to apply to all of these things. It doesn't even care what it is. Totally doesn't care. You don't need to know anything about mountains or about clouds, and the same operations of math work for both of them. I don't think most people get how crazy this is. It's Kabbalah. I mean, it's one cloud and another cloud is two clouds, and also one carrot and two carrots are two carrots. Like there's no shaykh between carrots and clouds, such them being one. It's a very weird thing to say. But you can understand why the guy that invented this should start like thinking that it's amazing. Maybe the world is not really made out of carrots. Maybe it's also made out of numbers somehow, and maybe that's even true. I'm just saying, this is where the basic thoughts lead you, and it's not very sophisticated thoughts. They're very basic thoughts. If you think of math as not, you don't get brainwashed with a sort of thing. Yeah, it just works. It's just how things are. It's what things are made out of, and so on. Kitzur, where did I get to this? I don't know why did I start saying this?
Length and beauty.
Yeah, I don't know, why not? Exactly. Why not? Why can't we measure beauty? We obviously measure beauty. Normal people think that beauty are the property of things. Things are beautiful, and therefore, also things that are more beautiful than others. We definitely should. I mean, this is not crazy. I mean, we should definitely also be able to predict, for example, what would be beautiful based on a theory of beauty, right? And we could do that, right? We could sort of see, you find this beautiful. We don't need people for testing our theory, right? And it sort of works. If you have, for certain theories of beauty, for certain basic concepts of beauty, it works, right? You like this, you like this. Now I know what you really like. I'll give you a third thing. I think that you're going to like it, and you'll like it, right?
But that's again what you like.
Well,
we're not
I'm just
concerned with you. We're concerned with it.
What is beautiful, of course, but because the thing that you like is beauty. You don't like things, right?
I don't follow. Thing is, but I would find out what's beautiful by going around to everybody. The mathematicians.
No, I'm just saying that we don't. I'm just saying that we have as good a theory of beauty as we have of numbers.
That might be true, but once we have numbers, we can apply them.
Once we have beauty, we can apply it.
Right, and I'm saying, but Pythagoras didn't go to all of his friends and ask him how many inches the mountain was.
Oh, of course he did. That's how it started. Of course he did. How else did he find out how many inches it is? What do you think he did? This is what you're not realizing. Math doesn't start before people looking at mountains and saying they're big.
Not. I'm not saying that it does.
That's all. People looked at mountains.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Barefoot people looked at mountains and said this guy is big. And then barefoot people looked at mountains and said it's beautiful. Now for mountains, they figured out how to work with big, and for beautiful, they also figured out somewhat how to work with it. Maybe not entirely, because we're stupid, because humans are stupid. But they're not fundamentally different. We didn't actually discover something about mountains and not about their beauty.
I don't think we discovered anything about mountains. We discovered something about length, maybe, that we didn't discover yet.
Length of mountains. Yeah, that's different machlokes. But the point is, length or size is a thing that we knew about before, and now we know how to use it better. Mm-hmm. And beauty is also a thing that we knew about before, and if you get some theories of beauty, we'll know how to use it better.
Okay.
That's all. There's no difference. Neither is magic. And if you have a good computer that can, like I said, can do high-dimensional calculations and stuff, you can definitely make you beautiful things.
I mean, the fact that math is very mysterious, that it's equally applicable to...
Beauty is also equally applicable, that everything is beauty.
No, I'm saying is I agree at that point, but I don't necessarily know how it speaks directly to... I mean, to me, I would assume that, again, it's not necessarily that beauty is less... That beauty is not measurable because it belongs to...
It's definitely measurable. I don't know where you got this idea that it's not measurable.
I know, but my assumption...
Why should it be measurable?
My original assumption was not that beauty... that we don't...
That's what people think, that it's literally not a different kind of thing. It's not a quantity. See, definitely what they think.
There's also, I think, another thing here, which is that I can assume that beauty might be the same regarding the object as length, just it exists less precisely.
I don't know what existing less precisely is even supposed to mean. For every little piece of it that exists, it either does or doesn't exist, which means that it exists precisely. unless there's something in between existing and not existing, which of course there is. But
Less
So
precise
are-
would mean that if it has an attribute of the person also involved. I mean, like if it's
Not
all
necessarily.
if it's all discussion about the object, like
I don't know who told you that
Hey,
some things
this is
exist not
necessarily
precisely.
imprecise.
I don't know what precise even. Firstly, I don't know what precise
Precise
means.
meaning that its ability to be
measured.
not even its ability to be measured. but
Again, that's a
representation and
preciseness is
measurement not-
precision is a property of your tape measure. Just to be very clear.
Yeah.
You're
It's
just saying
also
that
it's also a question of the ability to make a tape measure, right? Because making a tape measure assumes a certain level of precision.
I don't know precision in what. I don't know
Meaning
why
that
you
this
think
can
that.
be broken down.
Yeah, because people
into-
made a lot of
into
tape measures.
Exactness.
Because people made a lot of tape measures with a lot of little lines on them, and so on. It only starts with tape measures. Precision is not a property of
Thing is,
things.
we can even understand intelligently how going from something from one unit we can make it more exact by, let's say, having it, right?
Exactly, and it's the same thing for
half an inch
for
is
beauty.
more precise than
And a half a beauty piece more is a half more than that. Why would it be different? I
I
mean,
don't understand why it would assumably be the same. That's all.
I don't know what is precision means. All precision means how
Like
good
this. Once
how
I
good
have
a
an
measurer
inch-
you have.
Once I have an inch,
You could have a half or a third or all kinds of different things. And the same exact thing you could do with everything else, the other property. Of course, why not?
I don't know
Once
what
I have beauty, we could be a little more beautiful or a lot more beautiful or twice more beautiful or half more beautiful. All kinds of things. I don't get why it would be different.
See, I just don't understand. Again, maybe this is because due to extensive brainwashing, but in my mind, at least, and maybe I'm incorrect, when I see one painting and another painting, I could say that it's more beautiful, but I can't.
Oh, you definitely
it's not
could.
1.3 more beautiful. It's just
Again, that's because you're very schwache art expert, and again that's true for numbers too. Before you were brainwashed about numbers, taught. I'm not being brainwashed. It's just taught. Before you were taught how to use numbers in a precise way, you couldn't do that for numbers either. It was very hard to say how much bigger something is than the other thing.
right. But we did develop something that gives
And
us.
exactly, actually, people have developed things like that for beauty too. I don't know if
Okay, what would it look
there's
like?
literally schools called whatever, art schools or whatever, where they sort of teach
Yeah,
you that,
I mean,
right?
I can point to symmetry. I can point to
Exactly.
even
So, what's the
asymmetry.
problem?
But I mean, I guess the
I don't
amount-
get the baya. We can measure the symmetry. That's what would be
should we
going back
also be
to
able
quantity.
measure,
But
let's say, ethical behavior in this way.
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Why not? I don't know what ethical behavior means, but why shouldn't we be able to? You could be a good,
correctness
if there's such a
of
thing
a
as a good
person's
person. Yeah, could be. I don't know if maybe there's just either good or bad. I don't know, but assuming that there's
So
there's
how would you
degrees
either
of
be good or
so-
bad? We should also have half good and half bad.
Yeah, I'm sure there. Of course, that.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I'm saying as long as we're
Yeah.
thorough with this.
I mean, if having money is good, for example, then having $2 is twice as good as having $1.
right, $2 million would be.
2 million times as good. Yes. Maybe it doesn't scale. I don't know. We figure it out.
But what,
Yeah, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. We have to have a theory of
It's an
that,
abi-
but
it's an
I don't
ability
see
to
any
scale
reason for it to
also
be
says something
fuzzy.
interesting about
Aristotle
it.
says that we don't have a good science of ethics. Doesn't say that ethics are imprecise
well, he says that if we would expect the same results from.
because
And that's
people
the
are stupid.
No, but he also says that there are certain sciences that yield more precise
Yeah,
results.
science is a people thing.
I understand, but he does. Aristotle does seem at least to think, from what I understand,
No, I don't
that
think so.
certain.
No,
he
I
says
don't
if
think
you're
so.
expecting-
I would think I don't think so. I don't see a reason to think this. I think it's the opposite. I think that what he's saying is that people, because humans are good at specifying only very few things. Humans are very dumb creatures relative to how complicated the world is, not relative to anything, gods or angels or whatever. Humans are very dumb relative to how the world actually works, and everyone knows this, besides for scientists. Which means that we shouldn't expect that the few things we can define precisely should
Informative.
cut off
Okay.
what kind of knowledge, what kind of things might exist. In other words, if you're very little, for example, and this is sort of examples that people use, if you have very weak eyesight and you can only see 2 meters in front of you, right? You shouldn't, because of, and the next meter you see sort of fuzzily, and then until you stop seeing things at all. That's a very bad reason for thinking that only 2 meters in front of you exist, right?
But I guess my question is.
And
well,
our intellect works in a similar way. So there's like very things that are close to our logic or our intellect. For example, all the things that are, if you think that, by the way, if you think that this is the best way of understanding, but if you think for precision, yeah, for exactly, in a certain kind of precision, or Aristotle doesn't think that numbers are such a good thing, but assuming that this is, he would say demonstrative knowledge, whatever. It's only very few things are demonstrable to us, and those are the things that are really the very low level things. Because because demonstration works from certain principles, and like in any system, the lower things are easier to grasp, and the higher things. higher level things. So you can have demonstrative knowledge of like the lowest part of after assuming a bunch of assumptions, but you start going up the ladder, you get less and less knowledge. Those things are more and more important, but we have less and less knowledge of them, right? Aristotle has this picture of, right? We keep on talking. We mentioned this a lot of times of what's closer to us being not closer to reason in itself, right? So, for example, Aristotle says that we know more about ants than we know about planets, which means that for the value of precision, he literally uses this word precision. Again, precision by him doesn't mean quantifiable, but you couldn't. That's not the point right now. But we have more precise knowledge of ants than we have of angels. But that doesn't mean that angels exist less precisely than ants. It's just the opposite. They exist more precisely, because they're the sources of all the definitions. But when we speculate about them, we end up saying fuzzy things because we only know the most general forms of them. We don't know them very precisely, very specifically. And the same thing would be true, I don't know, about ethics and things like that. And the fact that we have bad, in other words, and this is what Aristotle says, and when he talks about the heavens, he says explicitly, for example, don't blame me for having bad arguments about the heavens. In other words, don't disregard the whole science of the heavens because we have bad arguments about them, because this is the best we've got, because we're humans and we're here on this little earth and we barely know anything. So you should like say thank you that I've even giving you bad arguments about it. And then maybe hopefully slowly you'll learn my bad arguments, maybe you'll get better and so on. But that's what it means. So then the same, if you apply this in the modern science concept, I think that what's quantifiable is the best kind of knowledge, although I don't even know if that's kind of knowledge at all. But let's say it's a kind more useful. Then you would say the same thing, that the things that humans can quantify are the lowest hanging fruit, right? It's very easy for humans to quantify certain things, and as math gets more advanced, we actually figure out how to quantify more things, and that's fine. That's not like making humanism smaller and the hard sciences bigger, and therefore we should all be Elon Musk or something. That's just progress of knowledge, that we gain more and more precise knowledge about more things, and you should expect that to happen as time goes on. You should expect there to be a mathematical science of God, which is what Kabbalah is aiming at, for example. People get very frustrated with Arizal's Kabbalah because it's just math and technical. But all advanced sciences are math and technical. That's what it means to have a precise knowledge of things. And people have this weird assumptions where more spiritual things or more valuable things, again, this word value or qualitative things, should be fuzzy, should be historis, and they shouldn't be just math. There's no reason to think that. That just assuming this whole dichotomy that Descartes and other people taught us between qualities and quantity, or first quality and secondary, whatever, these words, but it all goes back to these mistakes. But that's why, because I think that we have numbers, and I don't think numbers are more real than anything else. And I think that we should eventually be able to give a number for beauty, and I think we're working on that pretty much. And I think that we should be able to give a number, in other words, have precise knowledge of everything. Not because things are less, it's the opposite, they're more precise, which means that
But it won't be as immediately accessible to us, you're saying.
Well, you'll have to go to school for 30 years to figure it out, okay. to get to that. And you'll have to also change your language a few times in the process, because every time things get more technical, we get more precise language, right? Math doesn't speak English, right? It speaks Mathese, which most people don't know, right? And it starts off with English concepts and then flies off and takes words and gives them new meanings and so on. Yeah. In other words, I agree that we have less precise, not because the things are less precise, because they're more precise. But we have we're looking at them through a very weak window, or through a very blurry lens.
But they are more complex, at least we can say.
I don't know. That's again, this depends on other things. Like I just gave you two different things. There might be more precise actually.
You mentioned at one point that it's a matter of whether or not we see this thing as important, or whether or not this thing just requires having more concepts or dimensions.
Yeah, we could talk. That's a quantitative way of saying it. I don't know if it's not an Aristotelian way. You could say that. You could say just because things that are in more than one dimension humans can barely reason in 3 dimensions. I mean, we're actually good at reasoning in 3 dimensions, but bad at any other one. Yeah. Or that's one way to say it. Or you could just say it because it's more precise. In other words, you need to cut things up more in order to get at it. That's another way of saying it, right? For example, beauty, right? Numbers, we think that numbers are naturally caught up in the way that we get taught in school, but again, that's the product of a lot of progress in math. But beauty probably also needs to be caught up into 15 different words in order to work with it correctly. And combine all of them in order to make something, I don't know, but just, in other words, we need to be more precise, not less precise, right?
Right, but I'm saying is when I see something is, let's say,
have real
more
knowledge
than
of
another
beauty.
thing, there's more building here than another. We don't use those words anymore, I guess, for the reason that you're
More
saying.
what?
We never say that there's more building than another building. Right, we'll say either it's taller or it's wider, meaning we divide it up into
There might,
words
no,
that
that's not,
afford us
because there
a
might
certain
not
level
be
of
more
clarity.
building. I don't know if there's more building. It depends what you mean by building. Some things don't have a more or less. It might not be.
Because it's a unit, meaning it's a single thing.
Because the definition of a building is a single thing. We can call it a substance in some sense, and we say substances don't have more or less.
That's when you started off. Can't cut off the person.
Exactly, because buildings, and I don't know if we don't say that, but in English, some things English does well, actually. We discussed it in the other thing. We don't think there's more person than another person, even usually, hopefully. Because we understand that person is a definition which is complete in itself and unified.
Mm-hmm.
And person is not actually made out. Again, if you're a scientist, you do think. So this is why, very famously, liberal ethics are not scientific, or they're almost the precise opposite of science. That's why liberals are so against science. People don't realize they have this weird contradictory, like all religions, like all worldviews have this weird contradictory thing going on where, human dignity and equality and all kind of things like that are basically religious values, maybe Aristotelian values, and definitely not scientific values. Because science literally says the opposite, that you could be more human than another, and there's no reason why not.
Unless we follow some kind of Aristotelian bent. Right?
Unless we have, and that's why people think, so ethics has nothing to do with science. That's another way of saying it, right? So then we pretend that every human is as valuable as every other human. Although that's of course not true, not according to any science known to man. It's not true, right? It's only true according to Aristotelian science. According to Aristotelian science, very important, right? The modern view of human rights, for example, whatever this view is, right? The dignity of man and human rights, is that this has nothing to do with reality, which is, although even that is only the official view, because of course they would very much against if you say that some people are smarter than others, because they know that nobody really believes that. But officially, we're supposed to treat every human being with the dignity of a human being, although there's no such thing as a human being, and although it's obviously not true that human beings are the same according to anything that science knows about, right? We like lying that all humans are the same according to science, but everyone knows that that's not really true. No scientist really thinks that inside science. Thinks that inside ideology.
They're just discussing the value. They're discussing the value.
So therefore the official, that's something that nobody really believes that. But the official shit is that there's something called value, or moral value, or moral worth, which has got nothing to do with science, right? Like we've got the very famous fact-value distinction. Now every person should be treated with dignity. Why? Because nobody knows why. Because God said so, or because Immanuel Kant said so, or someone said so. And whatever. Locke said because God said so.
So
he says because God.
Basically, yeah. I think so. I don't remember, but the Enlightenment thing is more or less said because God created every human. And actually, most of them were not very politically correct. They were all basically racist, and they will only talk about white European men when they said all these things. No, very explicitly. I mean, if you know, Kant and Locke and all of them were very much said that black people are not human. See, this is why. Whatever. I'm not getting into this discussion. Point is, the official ideology is.
So that's a problem with.
This has to do with history. This history,
also.
Exactly. But the basic theory is that according to modern thought, general accepted modern thought, there's ethics which have nothing to do with science, nothing to do with how things are, and therefore you're officially supposed to believe that you're supposed to treat every human as a human, although they're not really that, right? We just pretend that. Why? Because let's say because God said.
There's
Okay.
also a value judgment. That's that. So value.
Whatever the idea is.
In that world,
I don't know what the
same,
idea
so
is.
that's
I don't know
why
what the idea is, but whatever. Maybe because it's not worth it. I don't know. I'm not sure what the source of this is. I mean, it comes from different theories, but it's the value with nothing to do with science. Is not supposed to change this, right? Even theoretically, even if we find out that some group of humans or some specific human is very dumb and less of a human or less economically valuable, there's science of economics, or which is also supposed to be a science somehow, or a science of intelligence, or science of anything that's whatever makes humans human. I don't know. And every single dimension there's differences. I mean, I don't think there's anything that's really the same about them. Besides for the fact that they're all human, we call them human. And then you got a metaphysical thing. And if you believe in metaphysical science, you say something like, every human is a rational being, or at least a potentially rational being, which is what a soul is, right? It doesn't have to actually be rational, only have to be potentially rational, right? Then you've got something which is literally the same for every human, and you can't be more or less of that, right? Because you could be smarter. That's what Aristotle says.
The potential.
That's what Aristotle says. No, this is Aristotle. This is, according to modern science, it's not true. In other words, I don't know if modern science says it's not true. According to the way the modern science thinks, it doesn't make any sense to say things like this. Because we don't believe in essences, supposedly, right?
We only believe what in the mixture of like attributes.
You only believe in atoms and void, like Epicurus. Atoms and void, basically. And then it doesn't make sense. Yeah, this is all either imposed by us. Even like you said, even the concept of human is just an imposition, or maybe it's just power that invented that because humans think that they're stronger and they want to kill animals. They invented the concept of human, whatever, like some people would say.
Right, it's a cultural construct.
And so on. Right. Or you believe, like Aristotle, that, and then they don't. Then if you're an Aristotelian about this, and Aristotle also didn't really believe in all humans, so I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. But the Christians' version of Aristotle believed in this, and maybe the Jewish version of Aristotle, or Jewish, I don't know, believed that each person has a nature of humanity, and it's the same one. You can't be more or less human because substance can't be more or less. Very important. You can be smarter or less smart, but that will be an accident of your humanity. The essence of your humanity is the same. And there's a certain minimum or whatever it is that defines it. Oh, we can get here. You'll see. And that's all. And then since every human is the same in that way, even ones that are not, we call it like lacking or something. We call them a defective human. We don't call them all human. And that's just a problem. Like if a dog is born with 5 legs, it doesn't mean that dogs have 5 legs now, right? Just there's something wrong with that. The human, okay. And then we could have a discussion of what to do with defective humans, but they're still humans. And that's a scientific fact. It's not distinct, like a value thing. It's not like magic that we need a god for. It's just a fact about how the world is. Yeah. And that's why ancient, like medieval science supposedly believed in that. Of course, nobody acts that way because that's Musser, but they believe in that.
Believe in?
That all humans are just as much humans as any other human. That's why, according to standard medieval science, like Rambam, we end up with a real question about saying that some humans are better than other humans. And so the Rambam really didn't believe that Jews are better than non-Jews or things like that. He might give different explanations for that, but they cannot believe that because it's scientifically wrong, not because it's morally wrong. Nowadays, we're not supposed to believe that because it's morally wrong. But the Rambam didn't believe it because it's scientifically wrong. Because it's just a human. How could it be different? It must have the same. You could say he's actualized more of his potential, for intelligence, for prophecy, whatever it is. But still, all humans must have the potential. Even a goy must have the potential for prophecy, at least, if prophecy is a human
that's why it makes sense
excellence and so on.
That's why, if anything, it makes sense to say that like a yid is made out of different, like some sort of substance. If you go
but that's just not true.
I understand, but in theory, to make it shtim, the two
to have
concepts,
a metaphysical
right? So then you would be led to say that they are
there.
substantial. The substance also different.
There might be, and I don't even know.
We definitely wouldn't make this consideration for ethical reasons. We do this strictly on the basis of there being.
Yeah, this is another. We can do the whole thing back. Yeah, we could do the whole thing backwards. I'm not getting into another. There's another thing. There's another way to explain why it's like you're saying. Why only. I'm not sure. Like why you would need dehumanization to kill people, because it seems weird to need that. We only need that because we believe in all these things, right? This is why it's a little backwards. The whole anti-dehumanization, or known as racism and things like that. I had to say, well, Nazis said that Jews are not human, so therefore it's very bad to say that any human is not human. Well, it's just wrong. You don't have to make it bad if it's wrong, right? So I'm not sure if it's bad or wrong. But now, the thing is that there are many ancient people that killed, genocided other people without believing that they're not humans. Just because they were in their way. It's a good enough reason to kill someone. But since it's only like, but this is why, and it's true. That's why I don't know if it's needed. Like you could be very evil. That's why I don't think it helps in reality. All these things, but that's just philosophy. Like you could be very evil without dehumanizing anyone. So I don't think dehumanization is the problem. I think the problem is being retzayach. And then you find an excuse according to whatever philosophical demands you have. So if you're in the Mala, you're old-fashioned guy, then you find one excuse. If you're a certain modern person that you believe that all humans have equal worth, then you have to say, but he's not a human. Understand? Because it doesn't say that others are not human. It says that Jews are superhuman, so that's different. It goes going in the other direction. No, it's not.
Why? It's basically just
Again, because he's just saying that there could be something. You have to imagine that there could be something beyond what you recognize as humanity, and that's true. After the second step, where you apply that to a certain group of people, whatever. But the fact that you could imagine more things, I don't know how essential he's making it. I don't know how essential it has to be at all. It's you can add to. I don't know. It's different.
Could you use this betterness or the superness as a justification for certain things that somebody would use to go after someone who's below the threshold of normal human, let's say?
Okay, and?
No, I'm just asking why that. I'm saying I agree it's a different distinction, but it allows you to do the same thing, saying that you're above everybody else versus saying that that person is below them. Doesn't it?
No, probably not. I mean, depending on what kind of obligations you have, you believe belong to each level.
Whichever departure.
There's a very big difference between saying, I mean, there should be. I mean, there's a.
In this particular sense of, let's say.
I don't think so. I actually think that the people, again, thinking of the people that. Firstly, again, this is just philosophy. I don't think that I think that people kill people for whatever excuse works, and then you figure out which excuse is the best.
That might be the case,
but then I also think
by saying that I'm superhuman versus saying he's subhuman.
No, I think there's a difference. Yeah, I think there's a big difference.
Be?
Exactly that, because, well, firstly, it's less. I mean, you have to be superhuman.
Reason to kill somebody, and then you can decide.
I don't think so. Again, I don't know what's a reason to kill anybody. I don't know that anything's a reason to kill anybody.
If you're using a rationale, the rationale is not.
No, it's very different.
Why wouldn't it be different? Be impacted? Meaning,
of course, it's very different.
Me being better than.
No, it's very different. There's a reason why people go this way and not that way when they want to kill people.
Right, it might be easier because you can also, your target is a little small.
No, because you need to make, again, the reason that what I just said, and I'm not interested in, I should stop with this. What I just said was that the reason why people invented humanization was because they believe that all humans deserve respect. Okay? If you believe that, then saying that I'm human plus doesn't save you, that's all. Human plus is either true or not, but it doesn't allow you to treat that person as less than human if you believe that humans deserve a certain kind of treatment, right? That's all. It might be some gava to say that you're better than that guy. That's a different thing.
The Nazis said both, right?
No,
the Aryan race wasn't seen as superior to.
No, because whatever, whatever they said whatever they said. The Nazi theory is not very coherent, so who cares what it is?
Mm-hmm. No, dear, it's not true. You're
no,
right.
No, not getting into that. They also, whatever. I mean, Hitler in the end said that if the Germans lose the war, then they deserve it. He was the only real, not consistent Nazi.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. There's notes from the people in his bunker in the last few days. He was like, Germany should just go to hell. The whole thing. The Jews were right, won, something like that. Because his whole theory was that there's like this war between that human civilization is a war between who can be stronger. He thought that the Germans were stronger. Turns out they were weaker. So if they're weaker, then they deserve what they get.
I mean, he believed he was a Darwinist till
yeah, of course. It's kind of Darwinist. Yeah, it's a kind of power belief. So if you believe that.
We shouldn't mess around with the way the world.
Yeah, but that's a different shit. If you have that belief, then whoever wins by definition deserves to win.
Right,
so anyways, that was last week's drusha. The point is that we're so brainwashed that numbers really exist, but beauty doesn't really exist. It has to exist in your mind, and there's no reason to think that. And there's also no reason to think that we can't be precise about beauty. It's just because we're dumb. And there's no reason to think that beauty doesn't exist just because we're not precise about it. Maybe it just exists beyond us or something like that. Right?
So how do you explain this thing? I know
that's
or its technical complexity is just...
What?
Either with technical complexity or with lack of focus, right?
Or with a lot of different ways. There was two. There can be 5 different ways in which it's beyond us.
Okay.
Or just for being far. I don't know. Just for being too general.
The
whatever.
original argument was that it might not be so beyond us as much as something that we don't emphasize.
Maybe just brainwashing. Maybe it's just because General Motors finds numbers more useful than beauty. By the way, that's a critical theory.
That's why it's...
The reason why you get taught so much about numbers in school and so little about beauty is because General Motors finds numbers more useful.
Not really. The nicer cars sell better than the faster ones, I think.
Well, the nicer cars, actually not. By the way, that's not true. No. Cars don't... No, they thought that, and then they figured out that it's that it's the boring cars that
BMW made a car that looks beautiful and doesn't go very fast. I think it's wildly popular.
Yeah, but the beauty, whatever. They're not so. They gave up
Even
on
that might use
kids.
numbers, but
I don't know so much about cars, but I there's a theory that says that
is there a book here about cars?
there's a theory.
That was a beauty in general.
No, that's about beautiful people. There's a theory that says that. Yeah, no, of course. What do you mean? This whole thing of, but this is true. What do you mean? Anything useless, beauty is famously useless. It's again, and if it's useless, then industry has no use for it, because industry is by definition only about useful things. And then if you're a beautiful person, then you're like a starving artist. That's where the whole idea comes from, right? And that's why. But that's just a conspiracy theory.
What
Beauty can be instrumentalized.
Yeah, like with your beautiful car example. But that's very schwache beauty, because it turns into like beauty is instrumental for what beauty is for, but not for selling cars. I don't think beauty is for selling cars, which is why
For selling cars, but it can be used
you
to
don't
sell,
actually
right?
sell cars with beauty. You sell other things. Sell it with other things, I think.
So
I don't know.
even like, if I could use a really maybe a cruder example, like McLaren made a car that doesn't look very good, but drives very fast.
No.
It was like uniquely popular.
But I don't know why you decided that driving fast is a number thing. Driving fast is a GABA thing. It's a certain kind of
It is a
going.
kind thing. No, I don't think it's
Or
not.
it's
But I'm saying
so-
is that
it's
car
different thing.
manufacturers do.
It's a certain kind of ego.
crutch
People
on-
have all
on
kinds of
the
different egos. Scheiden, right?
Car
Everyone has
manufacturers
to-
do crutch on a certain aesthetic appeal to sell their car.
Of course.
Not
Of
going to make
course.
a car drive.
Yeah, but but you know something? That's why they hate when you understand beauty. Okay, and this is
because
becoming.
then it removes the artistic.
No,
element of the
because
car.
then you would know how ugly their cars are. You see, according to me, beauty is something that can be taught, just like numbers can be taught. And look, like if you go to beauty school, then you start liking all these weird things, right?
Mhm.
Like
That's
this.
the reason why? Because
No, there's other reasons. No. Some not in, no. I didn't mean the weird things. But they have art appreciation classes and stuff like that, where you. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain level. Let's see, they call it kitsch or whatever. I'm not talking about kitsch is the opposite, right? There's modern art, which is only art students like, but there's kitsch, which everyone likes, and the art student think is horrible, right? Even the classical art student people think it's horrible, right?
Which way does it start? I always wonder which way it starts.
No, there's a whole drushes and theories about this, but the point is that there's definitely art or beauty that you accept as beauty just because you're dumb. In other words, just because you're not educated in appreciation of beauty. Just like there's goodness and intelligence that stupid people buy because they're not educated. I mean, just like there's numbers. I mean, just like people that are not numerically good take certain loans because they don't understand how interest rates work. And which means that
class on beauty, and I would actually like really work on it. I'd like my beauty standards automatically would completely.
they would become higher for sure, right? They definitely become higher. In which direction? Some might is distortion. Maybe it becomes higher because you have to outcome whatever. All kind of things. But they definitely become higher, right? They definitely become higher.
If it's being taught
And less manipulatable. Anyone that's taught well is less manipulatable, which means that education is against industrial society and free liberal education, right? Because you buy less things, literally buy less things, right? All the advertisers need you to be very gullible, right? Which means that since they also need some people to teach to learn math, so they figured out something like this. Okay, whatever. You want to know my whole conspiracy theory? They need a few engineers. So the thing is that there's like autistic people, which by nature like only numbers, and they don't get beauty. So they're actually the most manipulatable people ever, because they only understand like tachlis, and therefore you give him more dollars than someone else. He'll do whatever you ask him. And those people, they get sent to STEM schools. They teach them math and physics, and then they build rockets for people to kill other people with and whatever. And that's all very much consistent with the theory that industry hates philosophy. Because if people would be philosophers, they wouldn't go to war for whatever, and they wouldn't work for General Motors. General Motors is like long time ago. Point is, they wouldn't work.
An old CRT book.
Yeah, it sounds like an old book that I'm quoting, but it sounds better than like Google, because Google sounds cool, right? And
no, they like also the quote. It's also always has to be old history and an old article. Once, like some guy wrote a marketing memo for General Motors in 1945.
It's actually true. They actually still teach those stuff. In any case, so that's why it's very against. They're very against thought and beauty, and that's why you don't know enough about beauty, and that's why you buy these toilets that beauty is subjective. And then if it's subjective, that means that that your car is beautiful, though it's actually ugly. You know why it's ugly? Whatever, I'll explain you why. I don't know enough about cars. There's a lot of things that are sold as beautiful are actually ugly. But according to certain basic definitions of beauty. For example, a good example is minimalism. Wow, this is such a scam. Can't even explain you what a scam it is. So John Ivy figured out that in Japan there's some spiritual theory called Zen, which is a different scam, where long before her. In any case,
she's the modern iteration.
In any case, the thing is like this. The thing is that beauty, at the very basic definition of one of the basic definitions of beauty, is a certain level of complexity and symmetry and detail, or a certain kind of order. It's in a certain very basic sense. And I think most people, normal people, understand this. The more levels of fractal levels of complexity things have, the more beautiful they are. Okay, so in the olden days, everyone knew that a castle is something that every window has not three levels of windows. You have a molding which has another molding inside, and that molding carries a third molding, and there's some kind of course you have to do it correctly. If you just slap things on, then not beautiful. But that's the point, okay? Then there was this guy. Now the problem with this thing is that it's very expensive, which is why some people say it's just signaling, but it's very expensive to do that. You need to actually know how to. Firstly, you have to actually have taste, and also you have to actually get people to carve all those moldings, which is expensive, and more than it's expensive is not such a problem for capitalism. It's not very amenable to mass production. It's very hard to mass produce beautiful moldings. You could, theoretically there are ways, and you could buy such things, and they don't turn out to be nice. It's very hard to make them correct. Point is, it's not really easy to make. So some people like IKEA, the guy that made IKEA is also a genius for this. He figured out that we're going to invent a new style called minimalism. Okay, black, plain white boxes are beautiful. They're not. It's nonsense. They're just they're not ugly. They're not ugly. I could say that, but they're not beautiful. They don't have any. Nobody stares at their iPhone for wow, this is beautiful. It only looks good in the ads, and also whatever. It's not practical. It's also not beautiful because its form doesn't follow its function. But we're not getting into that. That's another that a phone that you use every day and you have to put into its ugly thing, and so it doesn't connect it to things. But that's another thing. But it's also not just simplicity. How's it called? Minimalism is ugly. It's not ugly. Minimalism is not beautiful. Okay, it doesn't comply with the basic requirement of being beautiful. It could be beautiful in a certain context, somewhat. If you go to this rack garden in Japan and whatever, every rack, there's a whole context that makes it make some kind of sense, and it's also based on this whole spiritual theory where everything is empty and nonsense. Gets it? Tachlis, it's not beautiful, but some genius has figured out that it's much cheaper to make this, and also it's also quite kind of hard to actually make correctly, which is why you can outcompete your competition. And therefore, they started making everything simple like IKEA. Now it makes a lot of money. It's noch stylish auch, verstehst? So he narrowed you, and if you have a little cycle, you understand that's not beautiful. Okay, it's cheap, so it's cheap, but it's definitely not beautiful. And shine. So that's one why they don't want you to understand that beauty can be measured. It says, well, it's just in styles, and style means beautiful. No, style doesn't make things beautiful. There's things from a million years ago that are whatever, from thousands of years ago that are still beautiful, and there's things that are still ugly. We still know the difference.
But the replacement of the American...
And you could actually, I didn't say there's not different styles of beauty that could be more popular at one time, but you could actually appreciate Egyptian beauty and Greek beauty and all of these different things, and they all have beauty. And some things just don't have beauty. None of them are minimalistic, if you noticed. There's no minimalist art ever, besides for Apple and IKEA. Anyways, I don't know why I'm talking about this. The point is...
Roger Scruton writes a lot about this.
Yeah, this is conservative shtism. The point is that... Yeah, but he's not the problem with conservatives is that they buy into business. The point is...
I don't think he's...
the point is that... The point is... Exactly.
And posting pictures.
The point is that if you would... one of the reasons... Yeah, that's not... The point is that the reason you don't know enough about beauty is because there's a conspiracy against you knowing about beauty. And there's a conspiracy against you knowing about all these good things. And that's why it's so underfunded, research into beauty. And that's only funded when someone can make money out of it. And then usually it's cheaper to pretend that something ugly is beauty, and then he could sell you a lot of it. Shine.
I like that theory.
That's why I think cars, I don't know enough about cars. Some cars I think are nice, but modern cars are generally ugly. They have different.
I remember reading
They're different.
Fascinating.
They have different theories. I don't know because I don't know enough about cars.
It's one of the few cars.
Not a good
most
enough
people,
cars.
when they look at it, they think it's nice. Even
But clothing, I could talk about clothing. You're also a clothing, kind of thing. But modern clothing is totally ugly. Like pants is the ugliest thing ever invented.
What is?
Pants.
Yeah.
Pants. It's also not comfortable, at least not for men, and it's also ugly. And the reason everyone wears it is because some industrialists in Britain decided that it's useful. Firstly, pants is very useful. So pants was always is a working clothes, literally. And then now you can't have any clothes that are not useful. It's crazy.
Jeans are hideous, and
they're literally working class clothing.
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
They're very comfortable. So
comfortable if you're working.
They don't look very good.
And Sean, old-fashioned beauty, everyone understood was not useful, and that's why
Okay, that was the whole point.
Well,
the more not useful it was.
It was useful for other things, but it also
okay.
did have a very nice. Older clothing had a very nice form-function relationship. Pleats went away because they were more minimalistic, but they're deeply dysfunctional to not have pleats in pants.
It's better.
It's much better to have pleats.
Why?
And the more
Because it
pleats, the
moves, it
better.
opens up.
Yeah.
So why didn't they have it? Also because it's
cheaper.
too much. Oh, it's cheaper, exactly. Same tenets. But gets it for some. I don't know. This is another weird thing where. That's why everyone thinks like all these rebbes that have like colorful stuff and big fat things, like they're crazy. They're the only normal people. They actually have beautiful clothing. Well, it's weird because nobody else wears it because it so stands out. But I mean, some of them are not beautiful because they just don't know how to do it. But if you know how to do it, then it could be beautiful at least. A suit, like a very again, suit is not ugly. It's all these things like you have to fulfill a certain. You have to at least not be ugly. Like nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Like nobody gets thrown out for showing up in a suit because more or less it's all the same. And the best suit is not so good. That's what I'm saying. The worst suit is auch nicht so schlecht. So more or less,
the real suit makers,
democratic.
They market very sophisticated. No,
and at the end of the day, it's all the same suit, right? The jacket and everything.
They don't even put the suits on the mannequins. They put these very elaborate woven garments for the royalty. Same with these people have a very different idea of beauty.
The real royalty things, those.
They are beautiful.
Yeah, they're actually beautiful.
They take hours.
And for some reason, like the more ugly that you are, the more ugly clothing you have to wear. I don't understand why.
I'm not convinced of this.
There's some whole conspiracy theory here. I don't know what it is.
Jewels and jewelry on top.
Nachamol, you have to do it correctly. I'm asking. Of course not. No, you have to do it correctly. Nachamol, you have to do it correctly. I didn't say that many people don't do it in a hideous way. Of course.
No, but in some ways it's less risk. Minimalism at least avoids.
You have to do the gold correctly. I didn't say that it doesn't have, because again, gold is not nice just by flipping gold all over. You got to do it with again, there's a chachma to this, and that's true. And that's why if you don't have the chachma, you can do that bad also. But that's not a reason to not do it. Just a reason to learn how to do it correctly. It's hard, maybe. It's probably harder than doing a plain thing correctly because you just have to cut straight lines and then you've got the beautiful thing. But if, this bookshelf is very easy to make correct. I mean, it's not correct because it's not straight. But if you would have patience to make it straight, and that's as good as an IKEA bookshelf gets, and that's all. If it would be more, then you need a lot more craftsmanship and a lot more, a lot of more thought would have to go into it. Yeah. But that's dumb conservative. In any case, the point is, no, we could know how all these things are. They're not magic. I have to say a different sheet, but sure.
That's a very good one, yeah.
Why? Because there's conspiracy theories? You like conspiracy theories?
I thought it was true.
What's the reason why everybody argues on beauty so much? I'm just trying to figure out.
Argues?
Why is it that beauty is the thing and like?
No, people don't actually argue.
Why? You can't. You go to any country, from one country to the next, you'll have like.
Our art is better than their art.
No, they don't really argue. I don't know. Maybe they have a few.
I don't even know how true this is. Like,
if you look at the history of suit making, it's a slow.
Wait,
decline
no,
from very elaborate.
It's always decline.
I think it's decline
from elaborate designs to.
Yeah, because even the elaborate designs were done. Very intelligently.
Yeah.
It was, and then it's sort of like, and now you have like the modern suit, and now it's kind of bouncing back a little bit.
Now it's more democratic because everyone could have the same.
But the ultra modern suit is the one that follows even, ironically, the most simple uniform, which is like just a lapel, pockets, and buttons.
Right.
But the older suits had even in more subtle details, more complexity, like different shoulder positionings and different extra buttons and places where
people
buttons.
disagree. So I don't know. So again, maybe there's more ways to be beautiful than there is to be big. That just means it's more, like I said, it's more high dimensional.
But even
I don't think. If you go to the Met Museum and you walk through every hall for Egyptian art, I don't think anyone thinks that one of them is ugly, and like I don't think the guy from Egypt thinks that the South American art is ugly. He has a different way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like and the fact that the variation doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It means that it does exist. Just more. There's more ways of doing it. Okay, why are something have more ways? That's an interesting question, but it doesn't mean that it's. I mean, the fact of different tastes existing doesn't mean that all of them are not good tastes. There's very few things that people actually, there's very few things that people actually disagree on. For example, like this famous matters of taste. I think very few things people actually disagree on. Like there's a machlokes if cilantro tastes good. A real machlokes, like it has the genetic mutation or something. It does?
It does.
But the point is...
But coconut. Coconut
doesn't.
Coconut's
but it's very few things.
It's very divisive.
No, it just doesn't have a taste. I like it. Not the actual thing, like when you put it in the cake.
Right,
Okay, so but there's very few such things if you notice. Sweet, most people like sweet or some level of sweet. Some people, and you can give like evolutionary reasons for why. Most people like fat, most people like sweet, most people like flavor. There's very few it's overstated, I think, this whole, and also much of it also it's teachable.
The fact that people will eat their steak well done is just a mystery.
No, okay, but it's also teachable.
It is teachable.
You could take someone and teach them to like beer and to teach them which beer you should actually like. Whatever.
I tried this with
not teachable.
The modern fragrances that are mass produced.
Yeah, they're not good.
They only have one or two notes, and even the marketing has 2 notes in it. The more like artisanal, even the older ones.
What's Chanel? What's the fragrance?
Number 5.
What is it? What's the?
No, but they sell a cologne now that's only one molecule called Ambroxan, and they market that exclusively. They give it a name.
No, and
they
it's not.
Sell it in a bottle.
It's too boring.
It's a single molecule. It smells so boring and also so inoffensive, but because its only purpose is to avoid smelling bad.
Okay, that's the main purpose.
Yeah,
oh.
Yeah, but some of the fragrances that I like smell like leather, and the first time you smell it, it's disgusting. But if you learn the notes and you understand the complexity of how it was made and
how does that help
how it was
other people don't
designed,
understand the
because most
complexity?
people, if you teach them why you think this smells good, they'll agree with you after a
No, but
while.
I understand. But the problem is that you're meeting someone who you're not going to give them a drush every time you meet the guy.
No.
First time you meet him, you're wearing a thing, and the guy's going to be.
No, but that's like saying that Coke is better than whiskey because it tastes. It's a more immediately good.
No, but Coke
it's
is
more
not for other
immediately
people.
pleasant.
Coke is not for other people. In general, you're not going to smell your
Fragrance is not necessarily for other people either.
Of course it is. 'Cause you don't smell your own fragrance.
Of course you do.
Not when you have your own.
And not only that, you want it to be a certain way, good
Then
smelling.
you have to have the other person understanding that, right?
Not necessarily.
The smell of someone else.
Someone else might share in that perception.
You smell your own fragrance.
That's another
machlokes. Generally, you don't.
Of
Once you put it on, let's say someone you smoke.
It's only that.
You don't smell your own.
I want to smell a
smells it.
certain way to another person, and if let's say I do, and if he perceives this incorrectly, I don't care. It's just an incorrect perception.
Because he's just a stupid guy.
What?
He's a stupid guy.
Yeah.
It's like a test case. Like it's a test case. Like you go around like it's.
Yeah. No, but there are certain things that even most people will scrunch their nose a little bit.
So
I think it's well made. I think it's designed well, and I think it is a good.
That also makes no sense to me. If you're telling me that you go around that and most people...
Would you say that would you say that you shouldn't serve expensive whiskey because most people will taste it and say it's bad?
Well, depending on what you're serving. If
serving is a bad idea. Serving
sure.
is a bad idea, but would you wear something that if you thought it looked really nice and everybody else thought it looked really ugly?
If I didn't deep down think that maybe other people will appreciate what I think it looks nice, like if I really knew that everybody else hated it, sure I wouldn't. Obviously, people convince themselves that other people really understand in some way. Maybe I don't know.
But now they have to understand in some way that they'll understand what you are wearing and maybe perceive it incorrectly. But the only concern that I think most people have is, and I think it's true if you see even how people wear clothing and choose clothing, is they don't necessarily even want people to perceive what they're wearing as good. They want people to perceive what they're wearing the way they perceive what they're wearing.
Well, I'm so confused.
And the goodness is not necessarily affiliated with it. They just want a certain perception that they associate with it, and it's not necessarily emotionally contingent.
I didn't understand.
So, like, some people when they wear something, they understand that it's striking in a certain way. Now, they might think that the striking is good, and somebody else might say that the striking is bad, and they don't care. They just want to look striking. Does that make sense?
So is it for yourself or is it for other people?
I don't think it's quite either of these two things.
It's for other people, just not in the way, not for their enjoyment,
Not for their enjoyment as much as for
impression
your
and being
perception of
impressed
yourself.
of how amazing you are.
No, not
That's
even,
why-
not
okay.
even.
That's
No, not
why.
necessarily. I don't think necessarily this is the case.
Not how amazing, like how correct, in this like correct vision of beauty.
You're already giving a different. Doesn't matter. Then just you're
No,
saying
but
giving a
that's just
different
outsourcing
attribute
it
to
again. No, I'm
What?
saying is
No,
that people don't want to necessarily always be perceived as looking or smelling.
Nachamo, but
or
this is the
being
side. This is a
employed.
political
They want to
question.
be
Wait, but this is a
perceived as
political
being
question.
A certain kind of thing.
Okay.
Or being associated with a certain kind of thing. And whether or not this other person
No, I
thinks this thing is
understand
bad or
this.
good, sometimes people
I understand.
don't
They're
care.
saying that I want to be good, and like if in some senses it's true, right? Like I think
Let's say somebody will do.
we're
let's say
trying to
somebody
find-
will walk an old lady across the street.
no, we're trying to find a way out of the fact that it's for other people, making the other people to judge. That's what we're trying to find a way out of.
Right.
It shouldn't be connected at all.
No, it is for no. We don't know. No. We do
Right,
want. You
that's
see,
what we're
no.
trying to find a way.
We do
You
want.
know,
We do
have
want. There's
whole-
this is the same like with art, right? We don't want. My thing is gonna die. Okay, it's fine. We don't want it to be. We don't want it. Right? There's two simplistic theories. One which says I don't care about other people at all. It's just true. It's just for myself, which is nonsense because if you don't know the other
wear
people,
clothes.
you might. Right? Like you don't wear clothing. You don't need most of these things. Like then, not only you don't. It doesn't make sense. Clothing is something for humans that live with other humans. It's not something for humans who live alone. That's why the Venetian didn't have clothing. You know.
Yeah.
And or anything else like. But also the other extreme is on therefore it's the other people who decide what I should wear, or that not decide that whose judgment is what makes it beautiful,
That's the other.
And that's
makes it
different.
good clothing,
Right, you
and
can
that's also
define
wrong
these
because
things,
then
right.
it's not. I mean, in other words, if I could put a blindfold over those people, is that good enough? Or if I could like somehow make them an illusion that I'm dressed, is that good? I mean, are you getting dressed by? Could you reach Krishma if I give you an illusion that I'm dressed or something?
He said that Hashem is always here.
No, this whole Hashem is not the point about Hashem, right? Because Hashem doesn't either care, right? It's trying to make a point, right?
Yeah.
What is this? Maybe it is about Hashem, actually. I don't know. No, maybe it is about Hashem. I don't
Is it
know.
sad you're not Yitzchok? Is it sad you're not Yitzchok that can dress if everybody else is blinded? Like if you're able to blind everybody else?
No, not blind. Not blind. Blind is one thing. If
Have
they
them
all
perceived
have...
as being dressed.
Exactly.
Right.
I have the same
You
answer.
hypnotize
Exactly.
them.
Does that work?
You hypnotize them.
They think. No, in other words, I think in some extent that doesn't work, right? Because you have to really, in order for, you want them, it's for them, but for them that you are really something, right? Just
Yeah.
like being good. Like being a good person is being good to other people, right?
But it's
At least,
about
then
yourself.
at least big part of being a good person is being good to others. That doesn't mean that being good is a relative thing that is decided by the
Determined by
others.
the others,
The
right.
others might be mistaken by what's good for them.
Exactly.
Right?
They might be mistaken in thinking that the smell of leather is bad, but that's because they're poorly educated.